Inside the densely packed theater, the silver screen is desperately trying to entertain what's left of the audience's attention. The director has hidden himself among the audience and is now nervously looking around, trying to grasp the situation. Maybe they're so amazed that they're lost for words? One film, many years in the making and 400% over budget. This was supposed to be a movie so grand and so ambitious, it was going to redefine Hollywood itself. Instead, it nearly destroyed it. The credits roll and the director is waiting in anticipation for the applause. Complete and utter silence. Within the following days, United Artists, one of Hollywood's greatest studios, would be in ruins. Whose fault? A director so overly persuasive and ambitious that he would manage to get a studio to bet their entire future on his project. This is the story of how one man's obsession led to one of the greatest disasters in film history. Let's wind back the clock for a little while. To truly understand how Heaven's Gate made it to the big screen, we first need to talk about the man behind it. Michael Cimino. A man who took perfection to another level and for whom filmmaking was an all-consuming art worth every risk and sacrifice. Cimino was truly a force of nature. During the filming of his last film, The Deer Hunter, he had been insisting on using wild deer during filming, transporting entire buildings to the top of mountains and using every camera available to him while shooting abroad. But he must have done some things right, because what he would eventually deliver would snatch 5 Oscars at the 1979 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Picture. This made him one of the hottest names in Hollywood, with studios now hunting him down with alluring offers. Cimino eventually ended up securing a 2-picture deal with United Artists, where he handed them over a script that he'd been sitting on since 1971. The story was an epic western about the Johnson County War in Wyoming, detailing a deep dispute between land barons and European immigrants. The title? Heaven's Gate. Cimino had initially asked for $7.8 million for the production budget of Heaven's Gate, which subsequently had increased to $11.6 million once the film got the green light from the studio. Principal photography was set to start on April 6 of 1979, only a week after Cimino had earned all of those Oscars. But from the moment that filming began, things went off the rails. Cimino didn't just want realism, he wanted absolute control over everything. He ordered sets rebuilt, entire towns constructed from scratch, and even insisted on waiting on the perfect cloud formations before rolling cameras. One crew member famously recalled, "By day 6 of filming, we were already 5 days behind schedule." Cimino arguably managed to find the limits of what the demands of a Hollywood director can be. Sometimes even surpassed them as well. Here's a couple of highlights of what he got away with. Number 1. Cimino tore down an entire street that had been built to his precise specifications just because it reportedly didn't really look right. He wanted the street to be wider by 6 feet and refused to listen when the set construction boss said that it would be cheaper to tear down one side and move that back, instead insisting on tearing down the entire thing and moving both sides back by 3 feet. Number 2. In another case, Cimino fell in love with a tree that he'd found in Montana and insisted on having that cut down, dismantled into pieces, and moved to the courtyard in Oxford, England, where the Harvard 1870 graduation scene was going to be shot. Number 3. Furthermore, in the battlefield scene, Cimino wanted the grass to be vividly green so that it would contrast to the red colors. To achieve this, he had an entire irrigation system installed underneath the land to supply the grass with plenty of water. Cimino says obsessive behavior shaped the film's production from start to finish, often demanding up to 50 takes for simple scenes. By the end of filming, he'd accumulated roughly 1.3 million feet of footage, and privately it was joked that he wanted to beat Francis Ford Coppola's 1 million feet of footage from shooting Apocalypse Now. All of this extravagance ended up costing United Artists about $200,000 in salaries, location, and acting fees per day. The studio seriously considered firing Cimino on multiple occasions, although Senior VP of United Artists Stephen Bach stood by Cimino, comparing him to Michelangelo, and was adamant that the movie would make the money back. Besides, they didn't really have a choice. This was Michael Cimino, the man who had just won Best Director. Surely he knew what he was doing, right? Nearly a year and $44 million later, Heaven's Gate wrapped production and Cimino headed off to begin the edit. However, as he began his work, it can be safe to say that he might have gotten a bit worried with what he had, reportedly changing the lock to the editing room to keep executives out before the first cut could be made. He screened a work print for United Artists executives that lasted 5 hours and 25 minutes, which Cimino noted would only be about 15 minutes longer than the final cut. The executives refused to release the film at its intended length and even considered firing Cimino once again. In response, he assured them that he could re-edit it and dedicated the summer and fall of 1980 to trimming it down to its original premiere duration of 3 hours and 39 minutes. With the planned wide release on Christmas 1979 already long gone, United Artists and Cimino then set a new release date for November of 1980. Let's go back to that theater in New York. The lights go up for intermission. Cimino looks around. It's dead silence. He walks out to the lobby of the theater where the silent crowd has emigrated. On slender tables, ice buckets filled with champagne bottles have been placed out, although nobody seems to be touching them. Cimino leans over to his publicist and asks, "Why aren't they drinking champagne?" Whereby the publicist stares him up and down and replies, "Because they hate the movie, Michael." Another excruciating 2 hours goes by before the curtain finally closes and the guests can respectfully get out of their seats and leave the theater. The next day, the reviews started to come in. Confusing, overlong, so ponderous that it fails to work at almost every level. Renowned film critic Roger Ebert later recalled the film as the most scandalous cinematic waste I have ever seen. Panic erupted in the boardroom at United Artists. They had bet everything on the success of Cimino's masterpiece and was instead left responsible for cleaning up his mess. The damage was irreversible. Heaven's Gate had ultimately cost the studio $44 million and had only managed to make back $3.5 million at the box office. For that financial year, United Artists, who had been publicly traded since 1957, reported a huge financial loss, almost entirely because of the Heaven's Gate disaster. This tainted United Artists' reputation, and soon it was clear that the studio, founded by legends like Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks, was finished. United Artists was put up on the market, and within a year, the paperwork finalizing the sale of what was left of the studio to MGM was signed. So, what happened to Michael Cimino after this? The man once hailed a genius. Well, the Heaven's Gate fiasco certainly outshined his Academy Award accolades from The Deer Hunter, and the rest of his career was plagued by projects that never saw the light of day. You would have thought that Cimino should have learned his lesson on budget overruns and relentless attention to detail, after destroying an entire studio and all, and had he been a bit more willing to compromise with the studios that he'd been working with, his career might have bounced back at some point. But Mr. Waiting for the Correct Cloud uber perfectionist Michael Cimino kept wanting it his way. In 1982, Paramount Pictures offered him the job of directing the movie Footloose, but later got fired ahead of principal photography as he insisted that the film should take place during the Great Depression and wanted an additional $250,000 to rewrite the script and delay shooting. He eventually ended up directing 4 more big pictures, the most recent of which was released in 1996, all of which have an average Rotten Tomato rating of 27%. For the rest of his life, Michael Cimino mainly kept a low profile, eventually passing away in July of 2016, age 77. Now, here's the twist. In the years since, Heaven's Gate has been re-evaluated in the public eye. At the 69th Venice Film Festival in 2012, a restored director's cut of the movie received a standing ovation and was later shown at what Cimino called the scene of the crime, the New York Film Festival. Although this time around, critics hailed it as a misunderstood masterpiece. Deeply moved by the response, Cimino remarked that for years he felt like Heaven's Gate was a beautiful, fantastically colored balloon tied to his wrist, never allowed to fly. In researching this episode, we made sure to watch the film too. And it's a handful, there's no doubt about that. Heaven's Gate is an epic reminiscent of the times of Lawrence of Arabia with a huge set, a boatload of extras, and a general epic feel. Thing is, you won't see Netflix putting out anything like it today, and perhaps that's the reason why you should watch the film. And while you do, Picture Cimino behind the camera, waiting for the best cloud, Christopher Walken repeating his scene 50 times, and set designers working overtime to widen the streets. From a business perspective, Cimino was a walking financial liability, hence why so many studios dropped him. But when you look at him as a pure artist, the obsessive traits that was his signum is shared by many artists who become some of history's most renowned names. I'd like to wonder, had his medium been something not as capital intensive as cinema, we might have looked at him in a very different way. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing.